I'll just say that I think that scientific method was of dubious purity. But nevertheless, I'm delighted to be here and to be associated with anything that has Senator John Stennis' name connected with it. I had the honor of knowing him very well, and I can't think of anybody in my lifetime that I've respected more than I did Senator Stennis. I am honored to be the incumbent. 8 years ago, I was elected to the Supreme Court from the Central District. You know, I'm sure, that the state is divided into 3 Supreme Court districts, Northern, Central, and Southern. I live on the southern end of the Central District in Copiah County, which used to be in the Southern District. Then one morning I woke up and the legislature had put me in the Central District. That was probably 20 or 25 years ago. But the Central District is comprised of 22 counties. It goes way out of central Mississippi up into Bolivar County up in the North Delta. Then on the other side of the state, there are 3 counties on the Alabama line. And so the district is curiously shaped. It's changed over time to accommodate population shifts. But I have been campaigning pretty much this whole year. I think it was reported in the press that I was the first state official to qualify to run for office this year. I was over there before Delbert arrived on the first qualifying day in January. And I have been shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all the other campaign stuff ever since with the great cooperation of my wife, Mary, and my whole family. Just tell you a little about us. Mary and I live in Crystal Springs, about 25 miles south of here. You can almost see it out that window. But I drive in every day and come up to, I call it the redneck luge. If you've been down I-55 South lately, you know it's got concrete you can reach out and touch on the side of your car as you drive along through there. And I'm pulling for Dick Hall and company that they will complete that project in my lifetime. I think maybe they will. It looks good, but I drive in every day, and that's nothing new for me. I've been commuting to Jackson in one way or another most of my life. My dad was a small businessman, did a lot of business here in Jackson, and I made a lot of deliveries here in town when I was a kid growing up. And then when I became an attorney, my practice kept bringing me to Jackson all the time. Eventually, I moved my office here in 1989. Before that, I had been down in Copiah County practicing. I began my practice in Crystal Springs, my hometown. Got out of law school in 1967. You can do the math. I'll get a 50-year pin at the bar next year at the bar convention. But I went down to Crystal Springs. I never thought about trying to get a job anywhere. I opened a small law office, and I mean very small. Paid $25 or $20, I can't recall, a month rent, but it was overpriced. And the floor was concrete, no rug or anything, and the restroom was across the street at the Texaco station. That's the way I got started practicing law, and pretty soon judges began appointing me to defend criminal cases for indigent defendants. And the first 2 trials, full-blown trials that I had, were murder cases. I was court appointed. I got $50 for each of those cases. I didn't have much to do, so I worked very hard and knew the cases very well and was fortunate enough to win both of those murder cases. So I think the sheriff noticed that, and then I got more criminal cases and some civil cases. I just had kind of a general practice, and Sheriff Sam Barnadoe of Copiah County and his chief deputy, as the 1971 elections approached, Judge Joe Pivot was DA at that time, and he decided not to run again for district attorney in 1971. He'd been DA about a decade. Later, he ran for circuit judge and served a long time as our circuit judge. Brad Pigot's father. Many of y'all know Brad Pigot. So anyway, the sheriff and his deputy actually encouraged me to run for district attorney. I was 28, and they not only encouraged me to run. When I finally decided to do it, they and their spouses got out and campaigned for me and helped me get elected. So law enforcement officers really got me started in politics. I served as a full-time district attorney. I was one of the first full-time DAs in the state when DAs could choose whether to be full-time or part-time. And I served in that office for 9 years. I loved it. I was elected 3 times, 71, 75, and 79. And I really liked that job, and I think I did a good job, and I think people down there who remember will tell you that I did a very good job as DA. But when I started as DA, Mary and I had one little girl. The state group insurance was okay, but you know, the salary wasn't too good. So about all we could do for recreation was have kids. So our family increased during the years I was DA. By the time I left at the beginning of '81, we had 5 kids. But in the meantime, one of those children became gravely ill. He had cancer and was treated here at the Blair Batson Hospital. We're so thankful for that great asset that our state has. But we had about $100,000 of medical bills that I couldn't pay on the $36,900 salary I was earning as district attorney. So I had 2 choices. I could either take bankruptcy, discharge all those medical debts, and keep being DA, the job I loved, or I could go back to practicing law and try to make enough money to pay those bills off a little at the time. And I did the latter. I left the DA's office at the beginning of 1981 and returned to private practice in Copiah County, eventually moving my practice here, as I said, in 1989. And by the, I guess about 2007 or so, as the 2008 judicial elections approached, I had never expected to run for office again in my life. Didn't want to run for office really. I had a dream that had come true. Of those 5 children, 3 of them became lawyers, and I was practicing law with 3 of my children and enjoying it immensely, but I got persuaded to run for the Supreme Court in 2008, and I'm glad I did. I think I have contributed something to our jurisprudence in Mississippi. I have, you haven't heard much out of me in the last 8 years, and I guess that's a good thing. I haven't been involved in any scandal. I haven't stolen any money. I haven't run off with anybody's wife or anything. So I've been kind of a low-key fellow, which I think is what the Supreme Court is supposed to be. I have worked hard. I've done my work. I've been current with my work. And I think I have been a good member of the court, and I think my colleagues would tell you that same thing on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is our state's court of last resort. It is the highest court in our state court system. It is of vital importance to the people of our state. When Justice Scalia was here in Jackson a few years ago for the dedication of our courthouse, which was not brand new then, but they completed it really after I got to the court. They were still working on it, but we were using it. Justice Scalia told the public at the dedication of that courthouse that what the Mississippi Supreme Court does is more important and more significant in the lives of Mississippi than what the United States Supreme Court does, and he's right. The Supreme Court of Mississippi is the nerve center of our legal system. It's the hub of the wheel. That courthouse up there on High Street is the only courthouse that serves the whole state of Mississippi. And it houses 2 courts, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So we know when we decide cases, I know when I decide cases, that what I am doing is going to probably establish some kind of precedent. And we do adhere to precedent as we should as an appellate court. So I'm very careful about what I do. We hear more more criminal cases than civil. It's kind of even, really. We don't hear that many more criminal cases, but there are slightly more criminal cases than civil cases. We hear every kind of case. Everything that goes on in your circuit courts, your county courts, your chancery courts, makes its way to the Supreme Court in the form of appeals. We also handle rate cases from the Public Service Commission. We handle administrative decisions from the Workers' Compensation Commission. Those come straight to the Supreme Court now if they're appealed. The law was changed in that regard since I've been on the court. So it's a court that's important to the people. And they are the same kinds of people that I represented in my law practice. I didn't have a big corporate practice. I'm not knocking those who do. That's a very fine kind of law practice to have, but that wasn't Jim Kitchen's kind of law practice. I represented Mississippi families with whatever legal problems they might have. Every family has legal issues of various kinds, whether it's something as simple as a deed or a will or something much more serious. And that's the kind of law practice I had for the 32 years that I was not district attorney. I had been an attorney for 41 years when I was asked to run for the Supreme Court, and I'm glad that I accepted that challenge because I think I brought a lot to the court. I have had more criminal law experience than anyone else on that court, and maybe more than everybody else put together. We have some very fine women and men on our court who are excellent lawyers, superb justices who have never tried a criminal case of any kind on either side. I know that criminal law is a two-sided animal because I practiced criminal law on both sides of the table in the courtroom. I was a prosecutor, and I was a very effective prosecutor. I've been a criminal defense lawyer, and up until the time I went to the court, I still accepted criminal appointments. I don't know whether anyone else in this race has done that. Certainly not as long as I have. I took appointments here in Hines County, some very notable cases, some cases that I really didn't want, but I didn't walk away from them. When I was asked to represent Byron D. Beckwith by Judge Freeland Hilburn, I said yes. It was one of the most difficult decisions, but one that I knew I had to make because I was trained in law school in my ethics class, which was taught by Chief Justice William Etheridge, a man I greatly admire to this day, that a lawyer has a responsibility when asked to take a criminal case by court appointment not to shirk that responsibility unless one has a genuine conflict. I was for everything Byron D. Beckwith was against and against everything he was for. But Meredith Coxwell and I gave him a good representation, a good defense. Judge Hilburn told me, by the way, that over 50 lawyers had asked him for that case. I said, why in the world didn't you appoint one of them instead of me? He said, because I didn't want Beckwith to be able to claim ineffective assistance of counsel. So I took that to mean that he didn't think that he would get ineffective assistance of counsel if I were one of his attorneys. And certainly with Buddy Coxwell by my side, that helped things a lot too. But the criminal law is the thing that really constitutes a threat to Mississippians. The fact that any of us can be a crime victim anytime. And we need to have those cases prosecuted correctly. We need to have them prosecuted in a fair and honorable way by qualified women and men who are prosecuted. And as my old friend and colleague Don Lampton used to say, we can't really have an effective criminal justice system unless we also have good defense lawyers. The system can't function without good representation on both sides. The system can't work for anybody if it doesn't work for everybody. If the most despicable human being that we can ever think of in our lives, and I may have mentioned one already today, but if the most despicable human being that we know can't get a good defense, can't have a lawyer who works hard for him or her, who does his or her best for that despicable person, then I can't expect that one of my children gets falsely accused of a crime that child would get a fair shake either. It's got to work for everybody or it doesn't work for anybody. Now, Judge Griffiths is a good man. I admire him very much. He's a hard-working man. He's got a good family, and he is a fine gentleman, and I wish him well in all of his endeavors but one. But Judge Griffiths was kind enough to come to me and tell me last fall, I guess it was around this time last year, that he was going to run in the Supreme Court race this year in the Central District. And I appreciated his courtesy in coming to my chambers and telling me that. And I'll tell you what I told him. I said, Kenny, I'd rather you didn't, but since you're going to do it, I'm glad I've got an honorable opponent. I don't know anything bad about you, and I wouldn't tell it if I did. And I think we're going to have a very clean race. He looked me in the eye and told me the same thing. And I want to thank him today for the clean race that he is running, and I know that that will continue until we get to the end of the road, which is less than, what, about a little less than 5 weeks away now, I think. Maybe Kenny's counting the days, and I'm counting them too. But in any event, this race is about two good guys, I think. I think I'm a fairly good guy, and I know Kenny's a good guy. So what's the difference in us? Judge Griffiths is a more experienced judge than I am. He's been on the Court of Appeals for 14 years or so. And he will tell you, he's decided around 8,000 cases, about half of those were criminal cases. That means he's voted on that many cases. Nobody's written that many opinions, but he's voted on those cases. Now, Judge Griffiths has solid experience on the Court of Appeals. But what do I have in addition to that? I've got a pretty good bit of experience myself now, having served 8 years almost on the Supreme Court. But it's one thing to write opinions and sign off on opinions about criminal cases. It's another to have been down in the trenches where the rubber meets the road on both sides of the courtroom and actually tried those cases. It's one thing to know about death penalty cases, but the Court of Appeals doesn't decide death penalty cases. I'm the only one in the race that's ever done that. I know that we're supposed to review those cases with heightened scrutiny, and I do that. I'm very careful about them. The Clarion Ledger had an article 2 Sundays ago about a great many people in Mississippi who had been wrongfully convicted and then exonerated. Some of those were death penalty cases. Some of those people sat on death row for some period of time before somebody figured out that they were innocent and should never have been there at all. I wonder how many there have been where nobody ever figured that out. We know that there have been some. There bound to have been some with the great masses of cases that go through our courts. We have the highest incarceration rate here in Louisiana and Mississippi of anywhere in the civilized world, per capita more than China. So we have a lot of things coming through our criminal justice system, and I look at all of them very carefully with a more experienced eye than anybody has on either of our appellate courts in Mississippi. I'm the oldest person on the Supreme Court. I'm also the most experienced. I think I'm probably the oldest person on the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. So I'm thankful that I've had that experience and that I'm no stranger to the actual courtroom, the trial courtroom events that occurred in those trials. I don't just know the theory of criminal law. It's not just an academic exercise to me, and I don't think it is to Judge Griffiths either. But I do have the benefit of a lot more experience in both civil and criminal litigation than anybody else on our court. I did not represent big business interests. There are good people that do that. I represented little people the times that I was a lawyer. I understand both sides of civil litigation and both sides of criminal litigation, and I think that that stands me in good stead. I thank you for your interest in my race. Appreciate you being here today, and I'll be glad to take any questions that the press may have.
We're going to take questions today.
All right, thanks, sir.